Markio Deathlings to this video about the academic, peer-reviewed, open access, interdisciplinary journal, the Offa's Dyke Journal, with me, Professor Howard Williams. And I want this video to serve as an update to a journal that's still quite new and is going strong, and to give you an overview of the past volumes, why the journal was created, and what's happening next, what's coming next in the future of the Offa's Dyke Journal. So let's get started. So the journal was set up by myself, Professor Howard Williams of the University of Chester. I'm a professor of archaeology with my doctoral researcher to provide an academic platform for original research exploring themes related to a research network called the Offa's Dyke Collaboratory, which we'd convened from 2017 here at the opening event at the University Centre Shrewsbury to bring together professionals, heritage practitioners, academics and avocational enthusiasts to explore the relationship between Offa's Dyke and Watts Dyke, the short dykes of the Anglo-Welsh borderlands, and comparative perspectives on linear earthworks, walls and frontiers across time and space. And we've been conducting a host of different activities, including we have the Offa's Dyke Collaboratory blog and website, which not only has now 214 blog posts, but a series of resources, news about events, as well as links to the journal. And we've got a series of conveners, a list of members. You can email me, howard.williams@chester.ac.uk, if you're in any way interested in doing active research in whatever capacity on linear earthworks, walls, borderlands, borders, frontiers, and those themes. And we have an archive of events, as I said, and a host of documents and resources in support. And we set up the journal to provide an open access resource where we can have access to some of the key publications about dikes, walls, and other linear frontier works in past research, and so to republish them in an open access format, free of charge to the authors and to the readers, and to promote new theories and debates about the interpretation of these still often undated or difficult to date and much debated in terms of their function and significance, linear monuments, as well as to provide a venue where new fieldwork, landscape observations, investigations involving excavations can be reported upon, and to look not only at linear monuments but also at their broader landscape contexts, as well as to explore comparative approaches between the monuments that are the focus of our interest in a research network supported by the Offa's Dyke Association, Cardiff University, the University of Chester, and others, including Cadw, Historic England, but also to look at how they compare and how they contrast with frontiers from elsewhere around the world. And this is the Dannevirke from northern Germany, to give you one example. But it's not simply about the monuments and the logic and the rationale for their construction, their function and use that we're interested in, but also their afterlives, the biographical stories of these monuments as they've endured through the centuries. And here's two 19th century monuments or structures erected on Offa's Dyke to illustrate that point, that these monuments remain and endure through time, and how they have heritage considerations associated with them, about how they are conserved, how we manage access and engagement with them, and how we interpret them for the broader public. So we wanted the journal to be a venue for this kind of discussion as well. So to date, we have produced 5 volumes, one per year, open access, but published in print, in paperback, via Archaeopress. So our partners for digital publication are JAS, and they have then liaised with Archaeopress to produce paperback versions. And here's the wonderful visuals of all of them. The first volume from 2019, co-edited by myself and Liam Delaney. Volume 2, likewise co-edited. Volume 3 here, another co-edited volume. Volume 4, co-edited but with a guest editor, Dr. Ben Guy. And volume 5, edited by myself alone. And we've added a new subtitle to the journal to clarify that this isn't a journal just about Offa's Dyke, but a journal for linear monuments, frontiers, and borderlands research more broadly. Now, to access these 5 volumes, you simply need to go to the online platform, and not only is there home information, there's details about the editors. There are ways you can search the volume for particular issues and themes. There is the current volume, which is volume 5 for 2023, and then there is the archive tab where you can access all 5 volumes in chronological order. And then clicking on each of these, you have volume 1 here and a table of contents. A wonderful shot on the cover there, I should say, which is by Julian Ravist of Offa's Dyke on Llanver Hill. And you can click through to the contents, and there are 7 articles: an introduction to the journal and the collaboratory, a classic revisited paper, Anne Williams's study of Offa's Dyke from a historical perspective, another classic revisited, Margaret Worthington Hill's evaluation of the archaeological and historical evidence for Watts Dyke, Paul Belford's review of preliminary fieldwork evidence for Watts Dyke and Offa's Dyke excavations by then Clwyd Powys Archaeological Trust, a paper on Llawarch Hen's Dyke, a monument near Brecon, and near Llangors, where Dr. Andy Seaman reviews its significance and the stories that unfold around the monument. Astrid Tummerscheit and Franco Witte do a review of the Dannevirke preliminary fieldwork results from 2010 to 2014. And finally, the heritage dimension is addressed by John Swagger, looking at the Oswestry Heritage Comics project as a means of engaging communities in linear earthworks that might hitherto or otherwise not be the focus of interest and engagement. That mixture of classics revisited, new field research, and heritage considerations goes through into volume 2 for 2020, where we have likewise 7 papers, an introduction by myself as editor, which tackles the political and cultural manifestations of these linear monuments in the age of the coronavirus and moves to decolonize the countryside. And then a paper synthesizing work on linear monuments from southern England, looking at East Wansdyke and also Grimm's Ditch, 2 chimeras in the landscape by Mark Bell. Then a paper that does a really important service of tackling the misinformation and pseudo-archaeology surrounding linear earthworks by Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews, the quote, Walls of Severus, Pseudo-Archaeology in the West Mercian Dykes. Then we have a paper taking us to Kent, looking at the Fasten Ditch in Joyden's Wood in Kent by Ethan Doyle White, and how its heritage interpretation draws on ideas of Saxons versus Romans. Then a paper looking at the contemporary landscape of Offa's Dyke and Watts Dyke, looking at living after Offa, place names and social memory in the Welsh Marches. And here I look at residential names and road names that evoke the presence or former presence of Offa's Dyke and Watts Dyke. Then we have a classics revisited pairing, Offa's and Watts Dykes by David Hill, and Grimm's Ditch, Wansdyke and the Ancient Highways of England, Linear Monuments and Political Control by Tim Malin. So again, we have those classics revisited articles joining with the new research and the engagements with archaeology, history and heritage. Volume 3 has this striking stained glass art that is on display in the Offa's Dyke Centre in Knighton as its cover, and the contents are slightly larger. We have 9 papers, an introduction editorial by myself looking at collaboratory through crisis, researching linear monuments in the challenging times of 2021, and then a classics revisited paper by Paolo Squatriti Patron's Landscape and Potlatch, Early Medieval Linear Earthworks in Britain and Bulgaria, a comparative perspective on linear earthworks as display by rulers and articulations of territory and identity. Then we have a distinctive contribution of preliminary fieldwork results, multi-authored, lead-authored by Keith Ray, called Offa's Dyke, A Continuing Journey of Discovery, an update paper on the Ray and Bapty 2016 book, which provided the inspiration for the construction of the journal and the development of the journal to build a venue for new research on these linear earthworks subsequent to that 2016 book. Then Liam Delaney's paper is Provisional Doctoral Research Investigations looking at LiDAR survey evaluating Offa's Dyke, where um, the paper was able to provide new observations and identifications of whole new stretches of the monument. David A. Humphreys, drawing on his postgraduate research, looks at Offa's Dyke in the landscape, looking at comparative size and topographical dispositions as indicators of function. And Garland et al. Give an introduction to a then new project looking at comparative approaches to monumentality in linear and landscape from the Iron Age through to the early Middle Ages. Then there's a paper by me called Rethinking Watts Dyke, a monument's flow in a hydraulic frontier zone, where I pick up on the research done by Margaret Worthington Hill, and I argue that Watts Dyke was carefully positioned in the landscape to manipulate and choreograph movement along rivers and across river valleys. Then we have a pairing of papers as the end, co-authored between myself and John G. Swagger, a paper called Watts Dyke, Wrexham's Comic Heritage Trail, and then drawing the line, what's Dyke practice and process. And this is the publication of a heritage comic, very much drawing on the skills of John, and a critical reflection on the process of making it in the troubling times of the pandemic lockdowns. Volume 4 for 2022 has a striking image of the River Dee from the Pontefract Aqueduct to evoke natural features in the landscape. And it's a broader special issue building on a conference at the University of Cambridge called Borders in Early Medieval Britain, edited by Ben Guy, myself, and Liam Delaney. And in this volume, we have a host of new perspectives, an introduction by Ben Guy, a sort of a general synthesis of new ideas on the fluidity of borderlands by Lindy Brady, a review of trade and commerce across borders by Rory Naismith, a paper on the fluctuation and evolution of the Anglo-Scottish border by Neil McGuckin, and King Athelstan and Cornwall, looking at the frontiers of Cornwall by Oliver Padel. And we then have Ben Guy back to look at the changing approaches to English kings to Wales in the 10th and 11th centuries, something of the afterlife of Offa's Dyke and the continued disputes and conflicts surrounding borders and frontiers. And then David Parson makes an invaluable contribution looking at the place name evidence for Offa's Dyke and what we can say about it. And Keith Ray, whose book we've already mentioned from 2016 with Ian Bapty, addresses the organisation of the mid-late Anglo-Saxon borderland with Wales, looking at the landscape context of Offa's Dyke. And finally, Rachel Swallow addresses Dodleston in Cheshire and its possible relationship to earlier and contemporary strategies of frontier construction and use in the Anglo-Welsh borderland. The final and most recent volume is the biggest yet, and here we have a picture, an artist's reconstruction of the Olga Dyke from Jutland, which is the subject of one of the papers within. So we have another synthesis editorial where I review recent work on monuments, and then a conference review by Gideon Shellick-Larvey, Tal Allus and Gideon Avney, looking at a recent workshop that took place on walls, borderlands and frontier zones, before Lisbeth Christensen looks at the Olga Dyke. Florin Curter has a pair of papers that take our focus to southeastern and east central Europe and then to Ukraine, looking at linear earthworks constructed in the early Middle Ages in those parts of Europe. before we come back to Britain with Roger White looking at Roman frontiers and the relationship to modern Welshness and Welsh identity. Eric Grigg looking at possible linear earthworks of early medieval date from Cornwall. And I come back with a second paper looking at the hydraulics of the linear earthworks of the Anglo-Welsh borderlands, looking at Offa's Dyke this time. Pauline Clark evaluates the portable antiquities data for the Welsh marches in relation to Offa's and Watts dykes, based on her doctoral research. And Morn Kappa addresses treaties, frontiers, and borderlands, the making and unmaking of Mercian border traditions, looking at Mercia's changing strategies of border creation. And finally, art, heritage, and the border takes the form of a presentation of art linked to a project called Walking with Offa by Dan Llewellyn Hall, in which he published, together with a series of poems, and three reflections by Diana Bauer, John G. Swagger, and myself on art in relation to linear monuments. So that's where we're up to date. A brief review of this hefty journal that's fully open access, fully peer reviewed, and is providing a venue for new research and classics revisited, exploring not only linear earthworks and walls in early medieval Britain, but comparative perspectives from elsewhere in time and space. So we've published 43 articles so far in 5 volumes, and the plan is to keep going for a further 5 at least. And I'm currently working on editing volume 6 for 2024, which will have some exciting new research in it as well. But I hope that was of interest to give you a quick overview of the Offa's Dyke Journal and the different work that's being done across the world, but particularly in Britain, exploring the significance of these monuments in and of their own right for understanding past societies, but also their significance in today's world.